welcome to Fox 10 News Now at 6:30. I'm your host, Kinsey Schofield, and we are getting ready to kick off our Tuesday edition. Steve Kraft just returned to the newsroom in his amazing blue raincoat. Hopefully we get some more weather for you. But first, let's jump into our Fox 10 Facebook update.
I'm John Hook with your Fox 10 Facebook update. A rainy day across parts of the valley. Skyfox capturing pictures of flooded intersections near 48th Street and Elliott. Keep checking in at fox10phoenix.com throughout the day for the latest weather updates. A 30-year-old man in serious condition after a postal truck ran over his Prius near 48th Street in Washington. Bad crash. Police say the postal truck was turning out of the main Phoenix post office when it collided with the car. The car was stuck underneath that semi. The driver had to be pulled from the car. The driver is expected to survive, and the driver of the semi will not be cited. Caught on camera, a homeowner turns the tables on a would-be robber. This happened in San Francisco. The homeowner fought to wrestle a gun out of the robber's hands. Police say the armed man walked into the garage of the home and attacked the homeowner. The victim pried the gun out of the suspect's hand and then ran outside and pointed the gun at his attacker. The suspect got away. There should be plenty of pumpkins around for Halloween. That may not be the case, though, for Thanksgiving. The pumpkin crop could be off by more than a third this year. 90% of the country's crop comes from within a 90-mile radius of Peoria. Farmers are blaming the record rainfall in June for washing out the crop. Here's a look at your valley forecast. No triple digits throughout the next 10 days, but we do climb up to 97 by this weekend. That's your Fox 10 Facebook update. I'm John Hook.
There it is. Nothing ruins your Friday like realizing it's only Tuesday. It's Tuesday. It's not Friday, it's Tuesday. And it was like a jam-packed Tuesday, so it feels like it should be Friday. So much rain, so much weather. Yep. Whole lot of weather. Hi, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're here. I'm on a delay, so I'm just now seeing my stupid face pause staring at the camera after I transition, so pardon my giggles. We've got a lot of news for you today, and where's my Hillary Clinton video? Why am I not finding it? I'm sure Mike put it in my folder, so I've got Hillary Clinton for you. I'm assuming I have to confirm with Brian. I'm assuming I'm going to have some very good live video for you of oh wow, we've got that live video of the storms. Let's do that closer to the end of the show, headed into the 9. That way it gears you up for what's coming. But I also have Hillary Clinton. I've got some Huckabee for you. We don't hear a lot from Huckabee. I was just having this conversation with Mike. We're not hearing a lot from these other candidates. How are we supposed to know what they stand for? How are we supposed to vote for you, Rand Paul? Where are you? That one guy that jumped in at the very last minute that I don't remember. Where is Martin O'Malley? I don't even hear from Bernie Sanders very often. Oh, but we hear from Hillary. We got a lot from Hillary. But we're gonna watch Hillary in Iowa. I've got some John Kasich for you. I've got some Mike Huckabee, so we'll mix it up a little bit, and then I'm going to have all of the highlights from our 5 and 6 o'clock broadcasts for you as well. So I hope you're excited for the show, as excited as I am.
When that's the goal that you're setting. I choose to stand behind a woman who has accounted for all of those variables. And I feel like she's got what it takes to make that goal happen. And that's plain and simple the reason why I'm here. It is my pleasure and my great, great honor to introduce to you the woman who is going to make that happen, our next president, Hillary Clinton.
Good job. Good job. It's scary, isn't it? But you did great. You did great. Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you. And thanks to all of you. Thank you so much. Wow. It is so great to be back here in Davenport and in eastern Iowa. You know, I have been trying out different possible careers, and you know, I kind of like the bartending idea. You know, I do like to listen, and people at bars usually like to talk, so it seems like a natural fit for me. And I had a lot of fun on Saturday Night Live on Saturday night with, you know, it's a little bit of an out-of-body experience when you are in a skit with somebody who is playing you. And I kept laughing, and the producers kept saying, you know, because you get there and you practice. That's the whole deal. You practice. You get there. I think I was there for like 8 hours. I mean, you get there, and you go through it, and you go through it, and they kept saying to me, don't laugh. You're not supposed to laugh. I said, but it's funny. I know, but you're supposed to be in the skit. You're Val the bartender. I said, okay, let me try that again. I really had a fabulous time, but now I'm back on the campaign trail, and I am looking for ways to do exactly what Kim said, and that is to make sure that every person, particularly every young person, every child in our country, has the chance to grow up to pursue his or her dreams. I think every child is born with talent, but they don't always have the opportunities that are necessary and to enable them to fulfill their own God-given potential. And I'm someone who believes with all my heart that the promise of America is that we're always investing in the next generation. We're always providing more and better opportunities for them, because that's how we stay a country that truly is the land of opportunity. And I want to see that for everybody. I certainly want to see it for kids who might otherwise be left behind or left out. And so for me, running for president is to make sure that we fulfill the fundamental promise of America. You see, I disagree with one of the candidates on the other side. I think America is great, but we could be greater if we do what we need to do together. So I want to take your questions. I want to start with just a few comments about health care, which is a subject near and dear to my heart, but affects every one of us, right? 18 million Americans now have health care thanks to the Affordable Care Act. And the Republicans have tried to repeal or weaken it more than 50 times. Each of the Republicans running for president has said that he would repeal it if given the chance. I want you to know that I will not let that happen. And I will work to deal with some of the challenges we have, namely skyrocketing prescription drug costs, out-of-pocket costs, other expenses which need to be reined in so that people can afford to get the health care they need and deserve. But I will not let us go back to a time when you could be denied health coverage if you'd had cancer, or you could be charged more if you were a woman. That will not happen when I am your president. You can count on that. But we do have to figure out how we're going to get those costs down. And I was looking at some of the figures coming out of Iowa, and what struck me is Iowa doesn't have enough competition to get the costs down. You know, you have one big insurance company, Wellmark, which covers a lot of people, and has just gotten approval from your insurance commissioner to raise premiums between 18 and 28%. That is a lack of competition. And I'm pleased that I'm starting to hear that people here in Iowa are looking at ways to get more choices and competition. Now, Wellmark has just said that they will join the health exchanges in 2017, but I was kind of surprised to learn that you don't have a Medicare Advantage program in Iowa because Wellmark won't offer one. A lot of other states don't have these problems. So when I talk about making sure we deal with how to fix the Affordable Care Act, provide more choice and competition, get the prices down, I'm talking generally about our country, but I also am very focused on what we need to do right here in Iowa. We cannot let those who don't want to provide health care to run the debate about this. And I don't want them to have even the slightest idea that they can force some kind of repeal where we go back to where we were and have the same debate all over again. We can't afford to do that. We got to be really focused about how we fix what we have so it works better for everybody. And that includes looking at what more options might be available through Medicare and through expanded Medicaid, and do everything we can to fix the VA so that our veterans get the health care they deserve. So for me, health care is a continuing mission. You remember that when my husband was president, we tried to get quality, affordable health care. We weren't successful, and it was a disappointment. But then I said, okay, what can we actually get done? I want you to know, when I'm your president, I will never give up. I will never quit fighting. I will always be there for you. And when we saw that we couldn't get that health care policy completed, I went back to work and we passed the Children's Health Insurance Program that insures 8 million of our children, so that at least we began to provide the health care that was missing. So I want to talk about whatever's on your minds, but I wanted to lead by talking about health care after I saw some of the stories coming out of Iowa with the lack of competition, a kind of monopolistic control over pricing. And it struck me that we got to figure out how to deal with that problem too. I want you to know that I will be very focused on that to make sure that people in Iowa get the choices you deserve to have and that other places in the country are now providing. So with that, let me throw it open. I don't know who wants to start, but I'm happy to, yeah, gentleman right there in a very good-looking cap that has Clinton on it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming. What are you going to do about veterans' health care for as disabled veterans' backlog?
You know, there's two things I want to say to that. One, we've got a big problem with backlog on veterans who are asking for disability benefits. I will do whatever it takes, including hiring more people, making them work 3 shifts, whatever it takes to get through the backlog. Because I have been, when I was a senator from New York, I had so many constituents who were raising questions like what you just raised. Like, I put in my application, I've never heard anything. I literally went to the office where the applications are processed, and I walked around, and there were stacks of paper everywhere I looked. We need to move to providing an online application that is going to be easier to process as soon as possible. I would start working on that immediately. But then, as I said, I want to get these processed as soon as possible, and I personally want us to adopt an approach where we give the benefit of the doubt to the veteran, instead of forcing you to have to keep justifying everything you ask about. And I want to tell you why I feel that way, besides the fact that I want our vets taken care of. When I was First Lady, I kept getting all these letters from spouses of vets and vets themselves, and even active duty members and their families. And the letters went something like this: my husband, my father, went off to the first Iraq War, and he was in great physical shape. He's come back now, and he can barely walk upstairs. He wasn't wounded, so far as anybody knew. What happened? And after I saw a couple dozen of these letters, because I used to get a report about what kind of correspondence I was receiving, I started to ask around, and there was a growing number of vets who said they had some kind of ailment that was weakening them. Their breathing, their muscles, their ability to be mobile, and nobody could identify it. And a lot of people were saying, well, maybe it's stress or whatever. But, we formed a task force to look into this, and I actually served on it. And we began to call it the Gulf War Syndrome, because people were coming home really disabled, and nobody could explain it. So over a long period of time, the VA really began paying attention to this. We still don't have all the answers, but I just think we have to have a very broad view of what can happen to you, because there were a lot of explanations for why people were not well. And now, of course, we have 2 million people who have served in one form or another in the last 14 years. And a lot of them have both the visible wounds of war and then the invisible ones: post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, things that are really the unfortunate signature injuries of this kind of conflict. So I worked on that when I was a senator, to try to do more research, figure out what we can do, and to give people more support for those kinds of problems as well. So I take this real seriously, and we're going to have to do more. So on the disability side and on the health side, this will be, one of my very highest priorities as president. Thanks. Yeah? Well, here, don't get up. If
No, ma'am. I'm addressing the 45th President of the United States. So I will stand. The Social Security Administration and Medicare is really in dire trouble. We know that. Now, I know I'm getting, please don't get up off that chair. Please sit. I know I'm going to hit a little bit hard here because as a former cabinet member and president of 42, you get your salary for the rest of your life. If that money were taken out of the Treasury, or whatever you want to call it, the treasure chest, for anybody elected after you are my president, if that money can be moved to the Social Security Administration, we're going to become very solvent, and people like me, people like myself, are not going to have to worry about whether or not my $1,500 is going to be coming every month, and whether I'm going to have my Medicare. I don't believe it was a law. I believe it was some sort of a act or something. And I don't know, but maybe you could do some research into it as to whether you could with an executive order cancel that. I think it's a very simple solution. And I have one other question after this. Could I have the honor of having my picture with the 45th President of the United States?
You certainly can. First of all, we have to make Social Security and Medicare solvent for as long as we possibly can. I agree with you 100%. And we have to also make sure that people who are totally reliant on Social Security, because we've had so many pensions either disappear or diminish over the last 30 years, that a lot of people are dependent. The average monthly payment under Social Security, if I remember right, is something like $1,334. And the poorest people are single women, widowed and divorced women, who often don't have any kind of other income whatsoever and are really under so much economic pressure. So we've got to get the whole system solvent, and then I'm looking at ways we can help those who are most vulnerable, which is predominantly women who live longer and are usually drawing a much smaller monthly payment because they didn't have either a long work history or a work history where their income was going up. So we've got to deal with that. And the other thing is, I want to say that the biggest threat to Social Security is the continuing efforts of Republicans to privatize it. This is the biggest wolf in sheep's clothing you can imagine. I fought hard against George W. Bush's plan to privatize. I will never let them privatize Social Security. And I will look into this other, I can tell you as a former cabinet member, I have no financial continuing benefits at all, none. So I will look into this, and I'll see if there's something else that your question raises as we try to figure out how we can do more to make sure that the two most important programs for older Americans are, always going to be in the best possible financial shape for all of you. Thank you. Yes, this gentleman right there.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for coming. My name is Ahmet. I'm from Turkey. We came here from long way, Istanbul. I don't have any question for you, but I'm bringing you best wishes from my country. And we saw you 16 years ago, first lady at that time. And we would like to see you as a president. And thank you very much for everything.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This gentleman in the white sweater right there. Yes.
Hi, Hillary. It's a pleasure seeing you again. My question is, how do you feel about Obamacare?
I am all for it. Obamacare, also known as Affordable Care, the Affordable Care Act, is exactly what I was talking about at the very beginning. We have to protect it against efforts by the Republicans to repeal it. We cannot start over on the national debate. We've been doing this ever since Harry Truman, and the forces who don't want us to have any kind of quality, affordable health care for everybody have always beaten us until President Obama got it passed, and we have to defend it, but we have to make it better. And part of what we have to do is to get the cost of prescription drugs down, get the deductibles down, get the other out-of-pocket expenses down. That's what I'm going to work on. Let's see. I know we've got a couple microphones. We have some more microphones over here. This woman right there. Yes, ma'am. Right there. Yes, right there. You with the pretty black and, yeah. Here comes a microphone. Can you get that? Yeah.
Hillary, it's a pleasure to see you, first of all. Will you promote reinstatement of the Glass-Steagall Act, which protected our savings from speculation? And would you break up the too-big-to-fail banks?
Well, let me tell you what I will do, because I care a lot about those issues that you've just asked about. I'm going to be proposing in the next week what I think will be the best way to go after Wall Street abuses and to rein in the too-big-to-fail banks and other institutions. Let me give you just a little background here. The big banks are not the only things we have to worry about. When you think about what happened to us in 2008, Lehman Brothers, AIG, the big insurance company, they were as big a problem as any of the big banks. They were all problems. So if you only reinstate Glass-Steagall, you don't go after all these other institutions in what is called the shadow banking system, hedge funds and other big financial entities that have too much power in our economy. So I've studied this real closely, and what I'm proposing is that we go after the risk. And if they are too big to manage, that's a risk, and they should not continue. If they are so big that they are causing disruptions in the marketplace, that's a risk. So I have what I consider to be a more comprehensive approach toward what we need to do to rein in the big institutions, including the big banks. We also have to do more to hold individuals accountable for their bad behavior and the actions that lead to these problems. And I took note of the fact that Ben Bernanke, who was running the Fed during all of this, just said, apparently in his memoir that's coming out, people should have gone to jail, and people should have gone to jail. And it wasn't up to the Fed, it was up to the Justice Department, and I've talked to some of the people who were involved in making the decisions. The laws were not as strong as they needed to be to hold individuals accountable. So I will do everything I can to make sure that individuals are held responsible, and if we need to change the laws, we will change the laws. And we have to enforce and implement Dodd-Frank. You know, Dodd-Frank has a lot of good stuff in it, but it's been really slow going because all of the big interests have been fighting against implementing. We're making progress on it. I've talked to Barney Frank, who supports me, and basically that's what we're going to do. We're going to enforce it, we're going to implement it, but I am going to go after risk. And sometimes risk is associated with bigness in a bank. Sometimes risk can be in an insurance company. Sometimes risk can be in the shadow banking system. So I'm going to go after what I think are the real problems, not the problems of the past, the problems of today, because what I'm interested in is stopping something like this from happening again. That is my goal. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, here comes the microphone.
Great. Madam Secretary, is it time for us to have a dialogue about the deployment of American ground troops to engage ISIS in kinetic activities?
You sound like a vet. Yes, thank you for your service, and thank you for your question. Look, we have that kind of conversation all the time. Having been a United States Senator from New York after 9/11, having been the Secretary of State who spent a lot of her time in the Situation Room, we have that constant dialogue. Right now, I don't think the conditions are in place, and I would not support that. I believe that what we're seeing now is a continuing effort to put advisors, spotters for fighter attacks on locations, if we can figure out where they are, trainers to do what needs to be done with the Iraqi army. And we have about 4,500 Americans in Iraq right now. I would not put a single additional person in for actual combat at this time. I do not think that is called for at this time. And I would say this, the situation on the ground is incredibly complex. It's made more so with the Russian actions, because they're not only flying now sorties. In fact, the young man from Turkey knows the Turkish Air Force had to intercept Russian fighters because they were invading Turkish airspace. This is such a complicated situation now. First, we've got to sort it out. Our goal has to be to end the conflict, protect people on the ground, go after ISIS, get a diplomatic solution which ends with the departure of Assad. Those, to me, are what we have to achieve. And any of those, I don't believe, is, at this point, furthered by putting more American troops in a combat role. The Iraqi army has to step up. The Sunni fighters in Anbar province have to step up. The Peshmerga, which are the Kurdish fighters, have to be better armed and supported because they actually will fight. And we have to, deconflict, as they say. We have to deconflict amongst and between the folks on the ground in Syria who cross over into Iraq and back and forth. So this is, to me, right now, not yet in any way ready for any kind of action by us. I think that would be ill-advised at this time. I do believe, and I've said this, that we should be putting together a coalition to support a no-fly zone. Because look, I think it's complicated, and the Russians would have to be part of it or it wouldn't work. But I think we have to make a very strong case for it. The Turks are flying, the Iraqi Air Force is actually flying, we have the French, we have the British, we have others in the airspace. We need to try to set up and enforce a no-fly zone to try to stop the outflow of refugees so people can stay at home, to try to stabilize the situation on the ground, prevent Assad's Air Force from continuing to bomb his own people by setting up safe areas, trying to prevent the Russians, who are not really going after ISIS, they're going after opponents of Assad. So that's why we got to figure out what's going on in the air. We got to figure out what's going on with the other elements on the ground before we do anything, and I'm not inclined to do anything that would require American boots on the ground for combat. Let's see, I saw this hand, yeah. Here comes the microphone.
Hi, my beautiful granddaughter here is 2.5. Can you?
She is beautiful too.
Thank you. Tell me your plans on not only making education affordable, but also safe, and your thoughts on gun control.
Well, unfortunately, those two questions really go together, don't they? Yesterday in New Hampshire, I rolled out my plan to try to move against the scourge of gun violence in our country and to get back to sensible gun safety measures. And I have long advocated these actions, but I'm really tired of people in public life saying our thoughts and prayers are with families whose children are murdered in community colleges or elementary schools, or people killed doing Bible study or going to the movies. We can't tolerate that. This doesn't just happen. This is not stuff that happens. We let it happen, and we have to act against those people who should not have guns in the first place. And I believe, and there's evidence to prove this, that the vast majority of Americans support universal background checks and keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, people with serious mental illness, people who have a felony record of violence. Not only the majority of Americans and the majority of gun owners, but sensible people everywhere. But we keep getting stymied because of the lobby for a very small minority of gun owners and the gun manufacturers, which stand in the way. So I have said that I'm going to go after this again, and I have a set of legislative proposals, but also some executive actions, because our problems often are, we got to close the gun show loophole. We have to close what is being called the Charleston loophole, namely the young man who murdered the 9 people in the church in Charleston. He was undergoing a background check, but under the Brady Bill, if you don't finish the background check in 3 days, they get the gun anyway. And he had a felony record, so he wouldn't have been eligible for the gun. But he got the gun anyway, and he used it to kill 9 innocent people studying the Bible. Yesterday at my event, I didn't know that she would be there, but one of the mothers of one of the victims at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut was there. And I met her right before I went in to do the town hall, and I was talking to her, and I mean, as a mom and as a grandmother, it's pretty devastating. It's just beyond my comprehension. You send your child off to school, happy, a little backpack, and next thing you know, you're being called because he's been murdered by a person who should not have had guns in the first place. And so I asked her if she wanted to say anything, and she did, and it was just a really touching moment. But I also said that at the very time when the community college was being attacked by a man who had an arsenal in his apartment, there was, on that same day, a 5-month-old baby girl in a car seat in the back seat of her car in Cleveland who was shot by just a random shot. We lose between 88 and 92 Americans a day from gun violence, homicides, suicides, and accidents. Now, I don't know if you've seen the article from yesterday. An 11-year-old boy asked the little girl who lived next door if he could see her puppy, and she said no. He went into his house, he went into an unlocked closet, and he got, I think it was a shotgun, and he came out and he killed that little 8-year-old girl. Now, at the very least, people should be expected to keep their weapons away from children, at the very least. So I feel like this is unfinished business in our country, and I am very determined that we are going to try to bring some sanity back so that people's Second Amendment rights are protected, but they're not absolute the way the NRA wants them to be. There are common sense ways to make sure people are not using guns to commit mass murders or getting access to guns as children and killing a neighbor. So I think that as the grandmother of this beautiful little girl, just, you do think about these things, don't you? Even if you don't know anybody who it's ever happened to. I've met too many people. I've met parents from Columbine to Sandy Hook. I've met people whose children have been murdered in these mass shootings. And I remember their faces, and like this woman yesterday, I remember her, the look in her face. So you think about this, and I think now about my granddaughter. And, what kind of country she's going to grow up in and what kind of world she's going to become an adult in. So I want us to get sensible. I said yesterday, I really would love it if, smart, responsible gun owners formed their own organization and took on the NRA. So the NRA is not the only voice for gun owners in America. I'll come back to college affordability in a minute, okay? Yeah, let me see here. Yeah, this man right there in the white shirt.
Well, welcome to the Quad Cities, Lori. I happen to work for one of those big banks, although we were not a bank that created the problem. It's U.S. Bank. Thank you for clarifying. It wasn't just banks. It was investment houses. It was mortgage companies, all of them. And I do agree with your assessment of risk. My question to you is job creation. What are some of your ideas there? How can we bring manufacturing back to this country? As a banker, that's really important, and it's important for all the people here in this room.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the last part of what you said.
Could you comment on job creation?
Job creation, absolutely.
All of your competitors are talking about it, and what are some of your ideas in terms of bringing jobs back to this country that are overseas, and other thoughts that you may have?
Right. Well, let me start by telling you what I did as a senator from New York, because I want you to understand this is not a new issue for me. If you look at a map of New York, obviously everybody knows where New York City is, but if you go upstate New York, it's rural, it's agriculture, it's small towns and cities, and a lot of the area up there has really had some bad economic years because a lot of the manufacturing, as you say, was either shut down or moved away, moved to the south, moved overseas, or just not continued. So when I became a senator, one of my goals was to do what I could working with businesses and communities to see if we could produce more jobs and to test out some of my ideas. And that's what led me to have my own plan about what to do about creating jobs. Number one, we have to do more to help small business, because small business creates 60% of the jobs in America, and we don't do enough to support small business. My dad was a small businessman, so I really favor small business. I understand how important it is. We've made it difficult to get credit the regulations are sometimes too much, licensing can be too much, so we've got to tackle that. Going right along with that is the need to have some big jobs projects in America again. Jobs that frankly can't be sent anywhere. And the two biggest ones that we are not doing enough to promote are we need to build and repair and maintain all of our infrastructure, and I am proposing an infrastructure bank to do that. It's maddening. I mean, I can't speak about Iowa's infrastructure, but I can talk about where I live. We have infrastructure in New York that is between 70 and 150 years old. I mean, every single day, you know, gas lines are leaking, in some cases even exploding. We have sewer pipes. We have water pipes that are leaking. When I was in New Hampshire yesterday, one of the local officials told me that their water pipes are leaking so much they are losing 40% of their water. I mean, this is foolishness that we are not putting people to work to repair what's under the ground and what's above the ground. So roads and bridges and airports and ports and rail tracks, all of that needs to be addressed. And the reason I'm proposing an infrastructure bank is because I want to get public and private money together to do that. I'll give you an example of how it would.
And that's sadly where I lose Hillary Clinton. I don't know where the other half of these videos go. I don't know where the start of some of these videos go. I give you what I give you, though. So that was Hillary Clinton out of Iowa today. And I was just talking about how we don't necessarily hear from a lot of these candidates that are currently running for president, and we probably should hear from more of them. Sorry, changing my lower third here. Here's one that has done really well in both of the GOP debates and has stayed out of the fray in regards to some of the mudslinging that goes on and has gone on, especially with Donald Trump in the, at the front of the GOP party. Although I know you talked to Samia earlier about him falling in the polls a bit. Mr. John Kasich.
Economy growth, increasing our military strength, and balancing that budget to move America forward again, well, this is the candidate for you. He's the son of a mailman and has been fighting his whole life for our conservative principles. Please help me welcome to Richmond, Virginia, Governor John Kasich.
Out here and I bump into somebody and he bumps into me and who is this guy, bumping into me like this? It's Tom Bliley. He's bumped into me for 20 years when I was in. You look great, Tom. Could you give him a round of applause for his many years of service? Impressive. Well, thank you all, and two things. How about Glenn? He's what a great talker you are. Where are you going to go? You going up? Huh? Give him a round of applause. He did a great job. And, of course, after I did all that, we're going to have a chicken in every pot. I can solve all problems. And I want to just say a word here before I forget, because they'll all yell at me. I'd like to see the state senate here in Virginia stay Republican. I think it's important that you're able to do that. And so I'm at the University of Richmond, the Spiders. Great basketball teams, huh? Yeah. And a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful campus. This is an awesome place. So I have two daughters that are going to turn 16 in January, and maybe they ought to be spiders someday, huh? Would you take care of them? Very nice, very impressive. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. And how many students do we have here so I could see all of your hands? Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story, and then it'll have a purpose. I grew up in a little town outside of Pittsburgh called McKees Rocks. And in fact, I was there with NBC News last week, going to my boyhood home. And Tom, a lot of the places, a lot of the buildings, the schools, and all these places I went to, they've all been torn down. My daughters call it the disappearing childhood of Dad. And very blue collar, never met a Republican, really, until I went to college. My father carried mail on his back. His father was a coal miner. He died of black lung and had bad eyesight. My mother's mother lived with us. She could barely speak English, and she was from Yugoslavia. And my mother was very, very intelligent, very opinionated, but undereducated, never went to college, which was a shame. This was a place where if the wind blew the wrong way, people found themselves out of work. So I want all the students to understand that this was not a place where you sort of had a stepladder to running for president of the United States. It's just a simple town. And so I left that town to go to college, and I went to a small school in the Midwest. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. It's called Ohio State University. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, there's somebody there, right? Now, Ohio State's got like 48,000 students, and I found myself in a dormitory that was 23 floors high, and I had 15 college roommates. Does anybody have 15 college roommates at the same time? It was nuts. And things didn't go well in the beginning, and I was frustrated, and my Uncle Emil told me, he says, Johnny, if you ever want to make change, start at the top. So I called the president's office and started badgering them until they finally let me in. And I went over to see the president. I'll make this story short. I go over to see the president. I walk in. Very impressive. I mean, he's the president of the university, big, tall guy, deep baritone voice, beautiful office, beautiful carpeting, furniture, desk, all this stuff. And he says, you know, what's on your mind? So I tell him. And then I look at him and I said, sir, I've been in school about a month here at Ohio State, and I'm undecided as to what I really should be. But looking at the lady that kept me out for a couple weeks, and the desk, the furniture, the carpeting, maybe this is the job for me. What exactly do you do? And so he told me about his academic responsibilities and his fundraising responsibilities, and he told me that the next day he was going to fly to Washington to meet with President Nixon, who he was acquainted with. And I said, well, sir, there's a number of things that I would like to talk to him about also. Could I go with you? So what's the lesson there to the students? Always ask, because they can't say yes if you don't ask. And he said no, that I couldn't go. Okay? But then I followed up and I said, well, if I write a letter, would you give it to the president? And now, he had never seen me before. He didn't know what was going to be in the letter. He said, I guess I could do that. So I went back to my dorm, and I basically wrote a letter inviting myself to the White House. And I signed it sincerely, John Kasich, P.S. You know, I've got time on my hands. I'm a student. So a couple weeks later, I go down to my mailbox, and sure enough, there's a letter from the office of the president, the White House. I open it up. I go upstairs and I call home, and my mother answers the phone. I said, Mom, I'm going to need an airline ticket. President of the United States would like to have a meeting with me in the Oval Office. And my mother is shouting, honey, pick up the phone. There's something really wrong with Johnny, you know? So my parents, takes them by complete shock. So they give me a ticket. I fly to Washington, and I get in through the security, and I'm sitting on a little bench, those little chairs right outside the Oval Office. You know where I'm talking, Tom? I'm sitting right there, and a guy walks up to me, and he says, you're going to get 5 minutes alone with the President of the United States in the Oval Office. What do you think? That's pretty cool? Yeah, awesome? Yeah, pretty awesome. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I got a new jacket, new shirt, new tie, new pants. I'm not coming out in 5 lousy minutes. They're out of luck. So they opened up the door. I walk in, I greet the president, he greets me. We sit at his desk, and I spend 20 minutes as an 18-year-old college freshman with the President of the United States. That's the good news. The bad news is I spent 18 years in Congress, and if you add up all the time I spent in the Oval Office, I peaked out at the age of 18 and should have come and been a professor at Richmond. So anyway, I tell that story for a couple reasons, because we got a lot of young people here. And I know in a political campaign, you're supposed to give them all this and that. Dreams come true. Hard work matters. Prayers matter. Shoot for the stars. That's the way life is. You know, in my lifetime, I have been struck by lightning many times. And I have been very appreciative of it. I was a state senator at 26. I knew nobody, and it was a miracle election. I went to Congress at the age of 30 and had an absolutely incredible time for 18 years. A lot of it was described. I was a military reformer, budget reformer, was the architect of the balanced budget. And so here's the thing. Everybody is not made this way, but I was kind of made to be a troublemaker. And it's one thing to be a troublemaker, but it's not enough to be a troublemaker if you can't get things accomplished. You know, you don't want to be a clanging bell in life. My friend Barney Skladany, who's here with me today, he used to laugh because I was constantly in a battle with the Pentagon to try to clean things up. He said, well, you're going to make the centerfold of Waste magazine. You remember that, Barney? There is no such magazine, but he would just jerk me around. And I spent a long time trying to bring about changes, which I was able to do. And then I left politics for 10 years. And I went and worked in investment banking. I worked for Lehman Brothers. I was on boards of companies. I wrote a best-selling book at that time. There were other things going on. But many of you, not the young people, but everybody else, remembers me from when I was at Fox News because I was a huge television star. Do you remember? If you don't remember, I've got tapes in the car. I can send you. And then I tell you, I felt a calling. I told my wife that I was going to go back into politics, and she said, that's just great. But I ran for governor, and the state was dying, just in a nutshell, we were about $8 billion in the hole, and now we're $2 billion in the black. We were down 350,000 jobs. We're up 347,000 jobs. Yeah. Our credit is very strong in Ohio, but here's the other thing I want you to know, and this is why some people just don't get me. Economic growth is not an end unto itself. So we were able to take economic growth and then spread a message that no one should be left behind. No one should have to live in the shadows. If you're mentally ill, we want to treat you and help you. And by the way, didn't even think about this, as I'm standing here, we've created emergency beds for the mentally ill in our state. Do we have enough of them? Probably not. But we're headed in the right direction. And it was not long ago when we all read about the tragic attack on Cray Deeds here. Was he the lieutenant governor, member of the legislature, by his son? Couldn't find a place to put his son. Tragedy could probably have been avoided. We never know. You can't turn the clock back and live in the past. But you can't ignore the mentally ill. You know, across this country, we put a lot of them in prison. They're bipolar, and they shoplift, or they get into a scuffle with a police officer. The last place they belong is in a prison. And we're trying to keep them out. The drug addicted. And by the way, for the students that are here, I hate to sound like your dad. Don't mess around with the drugs. You don't know how many people that I know buried their son and daughter because they started with a simple OxyContin pill at a pill party, and the next thing you know, they're dead. don't mess with drugs. Just don't screw around with it, because once it's like getting sucked into to quicksand. Once you get in, you keep going deeper and deeper. Can you get out? Yeah, you can get out, but boy, I'll tell you, some never get out. So we want to rehab the drug addicted in our state, and we're doing it, and helping the working poor. See, because I think all of the country needs to be raised, united. You don't want to tear the successful down. Certainly don't want to do that, but you also want to be in a position of where everybody has a chance to live their God-given purpose. One other thing I want to mention to you, I've been talking about this for a while. It's, there's no yelling and screaming and headline grabbing. But for those that read the Wall Street Journal, on Saturday they had a front page story that was eerily familiar to the things that I've been talking about over the last couple months. We all read about ISIS, and we read about a group of murderers, rapists. You realize that they actually believe that if, in fact, a member of ISIS rapes a 14 or 15-year-old girl, that they get closer to Allah by doing that. Did you know that? They actually believe that. They believe that these beheadings are going to give them a trip to paradise. And then we read in the paper that there are young people, successful people, doctors, lawyers, wealthy people who try to go and join ISIS. They said there are 4,500 people from the West who have actually joined ISIS. There's just a story about two young people from Mississippi, Starkville, Mississippi, who got caught trying to fly to Syria to join ISIS. Why is this? What's happening that this is going on? Well, in life, people search for meaning. They do. Some people think they can find meaning by just searching for unfettered freedom. And for the parents that are here, being the father of two 15 and 3/4-year-old daughters, I'm not real big on unfettered freedom these days. Or they're searching for happiness. You don't find those things by doing that. In the West, Europe, you realize that if you went into a church in Europe and you rolled a bowling ball down the middle of the aisle, you wouldn't hit anybody? Because no one goes. Somehow we have removed ourselves from the sense of a higher power. People have substituted the pursuit of wealth, freedom, and, quote, happiness for meaning. See, we're born with an innate sense that we need to have meaning in our lives. And you have to find it by pursuing real meaning, real purpose. And what is real purpose? It's being a center of justice or of healing, living a life bigger than yourself. This is what I want you to hear today. Living a life bigger than yourself. Now, if somebody had told me that when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, I wouldn't have gotten it. It's taken a lot of rough and tumble for me to get there. But I can tell you, when you don't have meaning, bad things happen. And I think in our country and in the West, we need to embrace the sense that there are a set of values that transcend time, that we will have to account for how we lived our life and who we are and who we were. And we had an incredible visit here. I mean, I remember I don't remember it very well, but sort of the pandemonium when the Beatles came to America, okay? I've never seen pandemonium that I saw here in the last week or so when we had a visit from a religious leader called the Pope. What I think he touched was a nerve. What's the nerve? We got to stand for something. That we can be better than what we think we can be as people. And secondly, I think he also touched the fact that, and I don't know about you, but I'm sick of all the negativity. I'm sick of all the attacks. They said the Pope appeared before the Congress, and 5 minutes before he got out the door, they're yelling and screaming and attacking one another 5 minutes after he left. Aren't you sick of that? Wouldn't you rather see people work together and be happier and more pleasant and more respectful from one another? Wouldn't you like to see that? So, let's reclaim that in this country. Let's reclaim the fact that our country is built not from the top down by some president or rich guy or superstar, that our country, the strength of our country, is built from where we live up. And we have to reclaim citizenship again. That what we do in our lives, and we don't have to scale walls or hit grand slam home runs. Sometimes it's just as simple as not letting a classmate be bullied. Sometimes it's just as simple as making sure that somebody that didn't get invited to the party, you get to tag along with you, because you get invited to all the parties, I can tell that. Sometimes it's just when somebody's hurt to make sure you get food to their house. We don't have to be doing, and as a professor, just taking extra time with the students, getting to understand why they're not getting the grade that they think they deserve. That's what we have to do in life. So for me, I happen to be doing this by running for president of the United States, which is kind of insane for me to think about. But we all have to do what we were kind of made to do. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. How about some polite applause, and I'll take some questions. Okay, Bliley. Yes, sir, right here.
Governor Kasich, thank you very much for your time. I want to say it's good on my birthday to get the first question, so that's good.
What is your name? What is it, Angelo?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Angelo. Happy birthday to you. Angelo, you know that is kind of a cheap way to get birthday presents, you know? I mean, let's face facts. Yes, sir. What can I do for you?
Well, so thank you for your time. So just a quick question that kind of addresses both kind of groups of the audiences that are here on the campus today. What would you say in terms of just executive leadership? You talked about your work at Congress with the budget, your work as governor of Ohio doing some great turnaround work there. What would you say are the skills that you possess to make a great leader? And then what would you tell a 22-year-old or a college student to develop the executive skills within themselves?
Well, I would say, first of all, something I didn't do all that hot as a young person is network. You gotta, when you see somebody that's successful, you kind of have to latch on to them. I guess in a way I did, but in a fumbling, funny sort of way. Because when you meet people who have something to give you, they're anxious to give it back to you. Grown-ups like to work with students. If a student says, could you give me advice? Everybody, you know, advice and elbows are the same thing. Everybody has them, you know? And people love to be asked for advice. For example, if I had any inkling whatsoever about being interested in politics or anything, I'd go see the former mayor of Richmond. And I'd bug him, and he'll see you. He's going to be a gruff old man. No, he can't. He's a great guy. But you latch on to people because those are the ones that help you to climb up. I mean, if your mom and dad are rich and connected, well, then you don't have to worry about it so much. But most people don't live that way, Angelo. Are you rich and connected? Okay, so that's number one. That's the right answer, not yet. So, you know, let me give you my sense of... it says, help me get on the ballot. Oh, this is me. Petitions due December 10th. Grab one on your way out. I'm not doing this very well, but please help me to get on the ballot here, would you? Could you look? I don't care if you're for me or against me. Help me get on the ballot, okay? Good note. Leadership. Okay, leadership to me is, first of all, if you're a leader and you get too far ahead of the crowd, then they can't hear you and you're not effective. But if on the same token you are in the crowd, then you're not a leader. So part of it is to get yourself in a position of where you have ideas that you believe in strongly, and you are willing to present those ideas, and you're willing to be lonely. A leader has to be willing to walk a lonely road. And let's talk about the president for a second. The president's willing to walk a lonely road, but I don't think he's in touch with the country. Okay, I think that's his problem. Ronald Reagan I worked with Reagan. I mean, everybody talks about Reagan. They read about him in a history book. I know the guy. I knew him. He had an uncanny ability to stay connected with people while still being ahead of people. And I think, in addition to that, I'm a believer that you can't play favorites. See, I'm a believer that you look at things that you see and you call them out. Now, I've called them out much of my lifetime in a way that really ruffled a whole lot of feathers. Am I right, Tom? I mean, I caused a lot of trouble. And I probably could have been a little better at getting what I wanted without ruffling so many feathers. But Angelo, when you come from McKees Rocks, the name of the game is ruffle feathers, because if you don't, you'll never get anything. So I think that being able to see a problem and being able to just speak out about it honestly, but I also think a good dose of humility matters too. And sometimes in the course of speaking out bluntly about things, humility can be lost. But only you know if you have it or if you don't have it. For our country, or for any of the jobs that I've been in, when I took over as governor of Ohio, I turned everything upside down. And at the end of my first year, I was the most unpopular governor in the country. Most unpopular. I didn't really care about it, to tell you the truth, because my political career, I didn't care about my political career. I wasn't interested in that. If I made it, great. If I didn't make it, I didn't care, which was a great way to be. And frankly, I don't care that much now about, I don't want to get people upset particularly, but I'm not playing for where's my safe landing? That just doesn't matter to me. So 4 years later, because I was able to get a team, and that's another thing that's important as a leader. If you don't have a good team, you're dead. You have to have a good team. Look at the Washington Nationals. They have so many great players, but they don't have a team. By the way, I was glad to see that Kirk Cousins had such a great game. He's a really great guy. I've seen him speak, and he's really cool. He's been through peaks and valleys, but it's all about team. If you don't have a team, you can't slay the world alone. But if you're willing to be honest about things, if you're willing to be by yourself and be lonely, if you're willing to speak out, and you will have a team. That's the way it works. And then you can do what it is you're setting out to do. And I think it's true no matter what you're in, whether you're in business, whether you're in the movies, whether you're in politics, it doesn't matter. That's how it really works. So, by the way, I had a re-election, okay? Now remember, I was the most unpopular governor. And now I don't want to talk about my current approval rating because that would be, I don't want to jinx it, but we had an election and I won 86 out of 88 Ohio counties. And I won the county that Barack Obama won by 40 points. I received 51% of union households, 26% of African Americans, and I won by over 30 points. It was one of the largest victories in Ohio political history. So, it worked out. Maybe it wouldn't have worked out, okay? I mean, maybe I could have lost. Life would have gone on. I would have, cried for 5 minutes, but life would have gone on. And that's kind of the way I look at it. It's a good question, though. We have too many people that put their finger in the air in politics. And you got to understand, in politics today, people yell really loud, but they don't represent the most of the people, I don't think. If that's where we're going, this country, we're lost. If all we are is a bunch of yellers and screamers and extremists, we're done. We're not. We're going to be fine. Yes, ma'am, in the back. What is your name?
My name is Kathy Moline.
Okay,
And
Kathy.
I don't know if it's a sign or not, Governor Kasich, but I wanted to thank you for coming to Richmond, and we first time have the sun shining through the windows in probably 10 or 12 days.
Yeah, take it as a sign.
I am someone that was born and raised in Ohio and moved here about 10 years ago. I want to thank you for your work in Ohio. It's certainly not where all of it, and certainly in my hometown and my husband's hometown, is not exactly where it would like to be. But my question for you is going back to your tenure in Ohio, and I thank you for that, is one of the first years I believe that you were out, you took on the unions, and you had a discussion with them. And I don't believe you got exactly the outcome that you were hopeful. Could you use that as a demonstration or a discussion of how you would use that experience to change the atmosphere or working with people across the lines to get something done for us, the American people? Thank you.
Well, first of all, in that, we have what's called a referendum process in Ohio where people they can put stuff on the ballot. And we passed our legislation, and the unions put it on the ballot and beat my brains out. Okay, I mean, I lost. You know, you win whenever you throw long passes. Sometimes they don't work. Okay, does that mean you don't throw long passes? No, it means you keep doing it. And in politics, that's always an issue of who's got the money and who's got the message and all that stuff. But I did achieve some things that I wanted to achieve with our state workers, and it worked out great. And in regard to unions in Ohio, I'll tell you a little story. We have a company from Thailand that is building a facility. It's called a cracker, just to make it, give you a little, when you're in science, you can, or biology or whatever you're taking. What a cracker does is it breaks down the component parts of gas, natural gas. It breaks it down, and out of it you can make plastics and other kinds of things. And so this company was searching all over the Midwest to build one of these things. It takes over 4 years to build one, and it costs $4.5 billion to do it. And they went all over the Midwest and said, okay, where are we going to build this thing? And we had a nice site and all that, but they worry about workforce. By the way, for the professors that are here, I don't know if we have any top-level officials, start teaching your students what the jobs are that are available so we can get them educated so they can get a job that they were meant to do. And I don't want to talk about, I'll come back to higher ed in a second. But so what happened? I sent the building trades union and the operating engineers union down to meet with the officials from Thailand. And when the meeting was over, the Thailand officials called us and said it was the best workforce presentation they'd ever heard, and they have picked Ohio. So what I have told unions is, if you work with us and we can create jobs, we're going to get along great. If there's a disruption and there's a problem, then we have to go and we have to try to figure out how we're going to fix it. But you don't need to create warfare where there's no warfare necessary. So in Congress, Tom Bliley, he had a tough job. He was working against Henry Waxman. That was a hard one because Henry is a very left-wing ideologue. And Tom had stuff he had to move on things like Medicaid, which was a very big deal. And but I think they got along okay. I mean, there was no yelling and screaming. Tom's a gentleman. They got along, and they agreed to disagree. But over the course of my career, and people like Tom, we're not at war with people who think differently than we do. We don't, just because somebody thinks differently than us doesn't mean we're going to hate them. It means we're going to look for area to agree upon. I want to tell you one funny story, tell quickly. I'm making my first State of the State speech. I used to work as an aide in the legislature. I get elected governor. I'm going to stand up on this big podium, and I'm going to make this big talk, my crowning moment where I went from an intern to the governor of Ohio, 11.5 million, great. And I'm speaking, and this lady jumps up and storms out on my speech in the middle of it and leads a protest against me in the rotunda of the Capitol. So about a month later, she wants to have a meeting with me. So my staff says, we're not letting her in. And I said, no, just let her in. So she comes in to see me. And I said, what's on your mind? She said, well, I've been fighting for this issue. Do you know that there's, a lot of thousands of young people who are 13, 14, 15 years old who are human trafficked in the state of Ohio? And I'm like, what? I didn't know that. I know that human trafficking goes on internationally, but I was unaware of it in Ohio, Virginia, all across the country. And I said, what are you doing about it? I have legislation. I said, how's it going? How was it going in reality? It was going nowhere. Nobody paid attention to it. So I said to her, so you got legislation to stop this. Okay, well then, why don't we go ahead and pass it? And she sat there and didn't say, are you still with me? She was so stunned. And I said, well, yeah, we'll pass it. We'll work out some of the stuff. And in a short period of time, we passed the most comprehensive legislation that I know of in the country to fight this. And we go to sign the bill. And she's up in her district in Toledo, and she's hugging me and saying I'm the greatest guy that ever lived. Then when I ran for re-election, she blasted me. But the point is, find things that you can do where you can agree, and fight like hell for things that you don't agree upon, but don't be personal. And remember, when you are in elected office, if you are wasting your time being a Republican or a Democrat or an ideologue, you are precisely doing that. You are wasting your time. You are in public life to bring about improvement, not to spend your time fighting. And by the way, I want to just say a word about higher ed. The people who run the higher education institutions cannot have as a goal that they want to run the institutions tomorrow. They're there to bring about change. In our state, the state of Ohio, we have passed a law that no money from the state of Ohio will flow to a college or a university unless a student completes a course or graduates. No money outside of that. And secondly, I have a report coming to me that may have reached me already, where I've hired business people to come in and talk about the cost drivers at the university. Ohio State University ran and owned parking garages and parking lots. The president of the university said we shouldn't be, let's just sell them or lease them. Oh, you wouldn't believe the uproar from the faculty. This is just a total outrage. Ohio State leased those facilities for $500 million. The non-academic resources at universities must be shed. I don't really know why universities build dormitories. You want to build a dormitory? Have a company build a dormitory. Frankly, it'll be nicer, and they'll maintain it better. I mean, so we need to think completely different about higher education, because I'll tell you what, if we don't, higher ed and the college experience will be it will absolutely be disintermediated by online education. It's coming at a fraction of the cost. And somebody will figure out how to use the online experience and give you a real college experience at a fraction of the cost. It's coming. So spiders, figure it out before you don't exist anymore. Okay, enough of that warning. Yes, ma'am, right here. This is why I'm so popular all the time. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
We have a problem in Virginia with Medicaid expansion. The Republican senators that came up and spoke today are not in favor of it.
Right.
You expanded Medicaid in Ohio.
Yes, I did.
Maybe you could talk about.
Well, look, here's the way I look at it. If for me to put somebody in a prison costs me $22,500 a year. Now, if I take somebody who's bipolar, anybody in here know anything about people who are bipolar? Okay, get their medication. How do they do, sir?
It was a hassle and a horrible situation.
Can they get on their feet?
They can.
Yes, they can. With the proper medication, staying on their feet, they can not only not be in prison at $22,500 a year, but they could get a job. And then they could live out their God-given purpose. I'm very big on that if you haven't noticed, okay? I don't know why he never let me be a professional golfer, but I guess that was not my God-given purpose. No, let's take the drug addicted. These drug addicted people, you know what we do with them? We put them in prison,
And then we release them, and then they meet the drug dealer on the corner, and then they're back in prison. And then maybe they die, or maybe they break into our home. You know, that's what they do. Now, we are rehabbing our drug addicted. And guess what? Our recidivism rate, the return of people who were in prison back to the prison for the drug addicted when we treat them, is less than 20%. The national average on recidivism is about 50%. Our total state recidivism is about 27%. So we're figuring this out. And then with the working poor, what they do is they spend their time in the emergency room. You ever been to an emergency room? Is there any place you would rather not be than in an emergency room? And yet they go there and they drive up the costs and everybody pays anyway. So for me, it's an arithmetic issue. But because if somebody's working rather than... Now, I also believe that it's a sin not to help people who need help, but I think it's also a sin to continue to help people who need to learn how to help themselves. So we believe in the element of personal responsibility. Now, I think it's also a moral issue. So that's why I move forward with it, and our legislature has approved it, which I'm really grateful for. We have a very conservative legislature. But look, everybody doesn't have to do it my way. If you don't want to expand it, if you don't want to do that, and by the way, our Medicaid rate has fallen from 10%. In our second budget was at 2%. We didn't cut 2.5%, didn't cut anybody off or didn't take away any benefits. We just made the system work. If you don't want to do it my way, then tell me how you're going to do it. What are you going to do about it? Put your head in the sand? I don't think I don't think that's appropriate. So that's kind of where I am on it. And I think as Ohio does better and we can show that it works, it's probably people are going to take a better look at it. What I'd like to do with Medicaid as president, I'd like to ship the program back to the states, take off the strings, and let the states figure out how to manage the programs, healthcare programs from the poor. That's where I think we ought to be. And in my state, if we didn't have all these rules and regulations, we'd be much farther ahead and be helping a lot more people. But, you know, Washington, you call down there, it's like, what time zone do you live in? I mean, forget it. Yes, sir.
Governor, thank you for coming. I remember watching you, and you were one of my heroes 20, 25 years ago in Congress, and then you disappeared in the Great White North, and I haven't seen you for ages. I generally agree with all the comments that you've made so far, wanting to help those that are underserved today. But my conservative friends would say that sounds just like George W., that gave us No Child Left Behind, that expanded the drug programs, etc., which are all worthy things, and yet all of them were done on borrowed money from China. You know, right now our government, our federal government debt is 101% of GDP. Our total American debt is $57 trillion more than it was in 2008.
Yeah. Well, good. Excellent point. Yeah, how do you do all this? Well, first of all, sir, I went from $8 billion in the hole, which was about 20% of our general revenue fund, to a $2 billion surplus. With everything I'm telling you. I was the chief architect of the last time we balanced the federal budget, and when I left Washington, we had a $5 trillion surplus. It's management. Can we do certain things and do them better? I mean, yes, let me just give you a couple examples. First of all, how they doing in Washington, by the way? And by the way, we got a bunch of people running for president who work in Congress. How they doing? They produce anything? Did they produce a balanced budget? Did they get through immigration reform? Did they do well? What have they done? In my state, we've done all these things. And in Congress, we did all these things. So what would the program be? And I'm going to be coming out with more and more specifics. Now, I'm not that much of an expert on budgets. I've only written 18 of them, which is about 17 more than most of the people that stand on the stage, most of them. So not all of them, some of them have done this as well. So none have both done federal budgets and state budgets. So what do? You take the K through 12 education and you send it to the states. We don't need the federal government running K through 12 education, okay? Now, yeah, it's great. Yeah, that's all really, really great. How are we doing with our education in the country? How's it going? Not good. We've seen SAT scores decline again. So the states are empowered, and they are largely empowered now. You know what we need to do? Hold our schools accountable. Hold our schools. In my state, if you fail for 3 consecutive years, we're going to appoint a CEO in charge of your schools. We've eliminated social promotion by saying you need to have a 3rd grade reading guarantee. We're not going to put you into 4th grade if you can't read in the 3rd grade. You can't believe the pushback I got on that. Oh my God, are you going to give us money to teach? I said, well, if you're not teaching reading, what are you teaching? So when we get the power and the responsibility and the dollars, I want to know what you're doing in your school board. That's what I want to know. Secondly, Medicaid should be sent to the states. If I had the Medicaid money, I could run this program a lot better, a lot more creatively, so we should do that. Welfare. Welfare should be sent to the states, and they ought to be a reflection of the values that exist inside of a state. And there are more programs that ought to be sent back to where we live. I'll get to all you. Hold on. Unless you were trying to give me a high five. Anyway, so, sir, that's absolutely true. Secondly, there are so many, there's like three or four components that's really hurting us. We overregulate because we don't control the regulations out of the bureaucracy. We need to have a program that just starts measuring that stuff so that we're not imposing regulations that cost more than what we benefit from them. And you've got to have managers that start to change that attitude inside the bureaucracy. Some programs get shipped out. Some programs get centralized and become more efficient. It's a runaway Washington. It's a runaway Washington right now. Regulatory change, tax change, balancing a budget, those are the tickets to being able to get us to a balanced budget. But that doesn't mean we don't have certain priorities. You know, it's like when you get your paycheck. Do you have a spouse?
I do.
Okay. Did you ever fall short in any year? Regularly. So you make choices, right? And that's what we need to do in Washington. There are some things that are priorities are bigger than others. The same thing we ought to do in the state legislatures. And the key is to move power, money, and influence and run the country from the bottom up, not the top down. And we did some of it with our budget deal, but we didn't do enough of it because we had a president that really didn't like it. Bill Clinton, you know Bill Clinton, if there's a riot coming after him, he jumps in the front and calls it a parade. But I can tell you, the media here, you know, they want to capture all this radical, you know, all this rhetoric, and you know, and they get clicks by their headlines and all that. I understand all that. I become president, they won't be wanting for news because you will have to put your seatbelts on. In the state of Ohio, the reporters there will tell you, I just walk down the street and make news. Am I right? Yeah, she won't. She knows. She's got a better job because I'm governor. Because I'm a person that believes in change and innovation all the time, sir. So can we get there? Can we balance a budget? Can we pay down debt? The answer is yes. Does that mean we shut off every program? Of course not. We're going to have to spend more money on the Pentagon. We ought to fix the Pentagon, but we're going to have to spend more money there. And are we going to just eliminate our social safety net? Well, think about the consequences of that. No, but we're going to make it work. And we've got to change the whole definition of personal responsibility and enact it. Yes, miss, are you his wife? No. Okay, because I wasn't going to give you a twofer here with that. Okay. You pardon? Okay, good. Well, by the way, there used to be a friend of mine who was a very successful guy. He was a class act, and he represented Virginia Beach. His name was Norm Sisiski, and if any of you ever see the Sisiskis, tell them all I said hi. He used to always poke at me a little bit, but I love the guy. We have to strengthen our national security, and all the branches are going to need improvement, but we can't fund defense based on what based on parochialism. So I may be telling you something you don't want to hear. I mean, I believe we have way too much infrastructure in this country. You know, we've got, the Secretary of Defense and all these reports say that we have 25% too much infrastructure. So if you're putting money into infrastructure, what's happening to the people, the men and the women in the military? If we're spending something on programs that we think we don't need as much of, that leaves us less, right, to spend on the programs that are vital. Follow me? Okay, good. Okay. Are you up for can you be Assistant Secretary of Defense? No, okay. But the point is, you want to make sure that you are not throwing money at this problem or any other problem. So we got to reform the Defense Department at the same time we're spending more money, and we have to spend more money. I mean, think about this. We had a Russian general who came out and said the United States needs to get out of the Middle East. By the way, I've advocated now a no-fly zone to protect people, a sanctuary for people in Syria. Somebody wants to violate the no-fly zone? But you don't know me, and you don't know McKees Rocks, but when we say don't violate the no-fly zone, we mean don't violate the no-fly zone, okay? We mean that. No red line. We mean do not fly in there, okay? So, if we're going to defend the no-fly zone, we better have the planes we need to do it. We need improved Navy. We need improved Air Force. We have a lot of things that we have to get improved. So the answer is, in all likelihood, your state will probably benefit because we need to have more defense, but we've got to make sure we're spending it in the best possible way. Okay? Why are you saying one more? Can we take... I've got all these people here. I'm going to take about 3 or 4 more. I'm going to give you a short answer if that is even in my DNA. Okay.
Yes, sir. My name is Jimmy Fry. I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I've looked at the Republican people who are nominees, and I just want to take the opportunity to say, out of all the candidates, I support you for the nomination for President of the United States from the Republican Party.
Well, thank you.
My name is Melina Foldesai. I am a student at Longwood University. I'm going to bring up a social issue. In regards to the recent Planned Parenthood controversy, how do you feel about that? And if elected president, what would you do in regards to it?
Well, there isn't anybody I know who hasn't been horrified by the Planned Parenthood videos. They should lose their funding, but we shouldn't kill family planning. We ought to move the family planning money into other entities where people can get family planning. But I don't believe that if I were president, we wouldn't be funded. We wouldn't even be arguing about it. It'd be done. Right here. Well, by the time I'm done, I would rather have, right now 18-year-olds believe they have a better chance of seeing a flying saucer than a Social Security check. So I'd like to change that. I proposed an answer to that in 1999. Which was to do this: hold the seniors harmless, let the people younger than them who are not going on be able to start at a somewhat of a lower level, which would carry all the way through, and then young people would get 2% in a private account where your account would grow with the strength of the economy. Okay, I proposed it in 99. What has been done since then? Nothing. You go to the doctor says you have a problem and you don't tend to it. You can't believe how much more serious the problem is when you finally do. So we're working on a new solution. It will be much tougher than what I suggested in 99. We don't have all the numbers, but before it's all said and done, I will have a program to deal with that. Okay? And it has to be something that you can get Democrats to be able to support. Who else am I? Right here. Yes, sir.
I'm Kenny Golden, the chairman of the Tea Party, introduced I was a former Republican chair, 31-year Navy veteran. I hear a lot of talk about what they're going to do with the VA. But I don't see a lot of specific answers about what we're going to do to solve the problem with the Veterans Administration.
Tom, was that in your jurisdiction, the VA, when you were there? Okay, I think we should voucher the program so that our veterans can have an opportunity to get treatment wherever they can as quickly as they can. Secondly, it's clear to me that we have to decentralize the VA, okay? And we got to figure out how we're going to do that. And we got to get business people to come in and help us to figure out how to break down that bureaucracy, because it is not working. And if there's, the number one priority ought to be anybody who serves this country, any of these veterans, when they come back, we should have a parade for each one of them. And in Ohio, by the way, if you're a veteran and you drove a truck from Kabul to Kandahar, you come back to Ohio, you want to drive it from Columbus to Cleveland, we're not going to ask you to take a test. And we're going to give you credit at the community college and the college and the university level for what you did that added value while you were a veteran. God bless the veterans. I mean, okay. What? I don't have any tickets for, for Taylor Swift or anything, or, or Lincoln Park. Go ahead. Yes, I know. You're just so excited. Yes.
Governor Kasich, at the end of your opening remarks, you mentioned that no one should be left in the shadows. How does this reflect your policy on undocumented immigrants in the country? What is your policy?
Yeah, what I would do is you need to make sure we have a border. Now, Tom and I voted in '86 for Reagan's plan. What we didn't do was to actually get the border built. You know why? Because, like, in your room, you live in a dormitory, a sorority. Where do you live? In a dorm? Okay. Can people just walk in and out of your dorm, out of your room? Pardon? No, but what if they can't swipe in? Should they just be able to come in? No, of course not. So we can't let people just walk into the country. So I would get that whole thing fixed. I believe this is a plan that could pass. We should have a guest worker program so people can come into the country and go back home. And then finally, for the ones that are here, the illegal immigrants that are here, if they didn't violate the law, they're part of our community, make them pay a penalty and help them to integrate, and let them stay. Well, we'll work out it, but you can't just, if you ditch the line, you got to pay a price for it. So maybe it's done over time. I'm not worried about that. But you can't just say, oh, okay, everything's okay, because they jumped in front of a bunch of other people who've been waiting in line. So I think that can all work. You give them a path to legalization, they can stay here. And I don't favor a path to citizenship because there are too many people who are waiting in line legal. Give them the legalization. That'll be fine. That's as far as I would go. I can take one last question. One simple last question. Who? President. I took a selfie with him when I came in. I'm not going to him now. I'm going to somebody else. Okay, I'll go right here. And by the way, let me just say something about the Tea Parties. I made the first talk to a Tea Party gathering in Columbus, Ohio. Stick on balancing the budget and cutting taxes, okay? Okay? Yes.
Thank you, Governor, for coming here today. Thank you for coming to the Commonwealth. My name is Mason Montgomery, and people have called you the Happy Warrior. And today I've seen a lot of warrior, but whenever I see you on TV, I see a lot more happy, and I don't feel the visceral sense that you're the guy who can do it. I know you have the best record, you've got more accomplished than anybody else on that stage, but we have to feel it. This is a very emotional election for a lot of people, and we have to know that you're going to be out there willing to fight for us when Russia claims land with more than 5 Russian speakers on it, or China intimidates its neighbors. Right. How do we know where is the warrior most of the time?
Yeah. Well, great leaders are not great warriors. You're looking for that red meat kind of thing. You're looking at the wrong guy, and I'll tell you why. When you're a governor, you can't be a warrior. You can bring about change, but tone matters. Because what this country needs, in my opinion, more than anything else, is a uniter. Now, some people say, look, I'm going to give you a good example. I think the deal with Iran is a horrible deal. No way I would have made it until they recognized Israel's right to exist. But some people say now, well, if I'm president, I'm going to tear up the deal the first day I'm in. The first day is 18 months from now. Now, that might get you all juiced up, right? I'll tear it up. My view is we follow it, and if they violate it, then we're in a position to talk to our allies about the fact that we have to slap the sanctions on, and if they're developing a nuclear weapon, we'll remember what the Israelis did in Syria when they took out Syria's nuclear reactor. but I also think that I have a good chance to be president. And I am not interested in dividing. I am not interested in hot rhetoric. Because when you're a governor and you're not, a senator or somebody that's never been in public life, in my earlier days, I'd use a lot more rhetoric. You know what I realized it did? It took me 2 days to get blithely to support what I wanted to do. The other thing is, I'm not playing to the cheap seats. If that's what it takes, I'm not going to be president. I'm not doing it. But let me tell you something. You look at a person's past record to tell you what they would do going forward. That's why I talk about my record. Don't have any...
Looks like my video froze. Let's see if we can get it to... move it all here. Well, it looks like it skipped all the way to the end. And let's stay in the political world and head on over to Rick Santorum. No, I think we saw this yesterday. I think we did. So Huckabee it is.
To make it possible for me to breathe free air. If it were not for them, none of us have liberty. And so first fruit out of the Treasury ought to go to the veterans. So I believe very strongly that if the VA system isn't working, then you provide veterans with the access to the medical care in their communities with the doctors and hospitals and clinics of their choosing, and that you make sure that the reimbursement rate is enough so that the doctors will treat them. Because one of the problems with people who have TRICARE insurance, if any of you do, you probably know that a lot of doctors simply won't take it because the reimbursement level is so far beneath the actual expense that the doctor incurs. Well, that's ridiculous. So that's one thing we can deal with. One of your other questions was dealing with Social Security. Look, I've been very clear. People who paid into Social Security and Medicare, I don't like this talk when people say, well, we're going to change the rules now. No, we're not. And let me tell you why. Because it's your money. Nobody asked you if you wanted to pay that. It was taken out of your check whether you liked it or not. And if you started work, I started work officially when I was 14. I had a lot of little jobs before that. I did stuff I hated, like hauling hay and catching chickens. And that's what prompted me to get a good education, by the way. If you ever caught chickens in Arkansas in the summer or hauled hay, you'd say, what do I have to do to not do this the rest of my life? And they say, get a good education. I said, I'm going to college, buddy. I don't know about you. From 14, every time I get a check, somebody's taking something out of it. Nobody asked me if they really had my permission. It was involuntarily taken out of my check with this caveat. Don't worry, when you're out there in your 60s, that money will be there for you. Well, then the government spent on a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with the deposits that I'd made. So I'm very adamant that we don't change the rules in the middle of the game for Social Security and Medicare. We robbed Medicare $700 billion to pay for Obamacare, for example. That was theft. Another question was about Vice President. It'd be a little presumptuous for me to tell you who I would pick, because I need to be in the position of the nomination, which I need your help to get, particularly in Iowa. But I would tell you the kind of person I would pick. No person ought to be picked as Vice President just because they add something political to the ticket. Because you've got to remember, we're talking about here the most important job in this country, and just picking somebody because they might get you elected, you ought to get somebody who might help you get elected, but number one qualification is not political. Number one qualification, could they become president at the very moment at which they're sworn in as well? could they lead this country and be president? Because if they can't, you shouldn't pick them as vice president. I think I covered the questions. Okay, yes, sir, right back here.
I got a question, I guess, about health care insurance.
Yes, sir.
My health care insurance has doubled in the last 8 years, at least double, maybe tripled, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, what can be done with the health care insurance issues or our history of the problem we have with our health care coverage that we need to have, I guess?
Let's back up and remind everybody that the basic issue of Obamacare was not health coverage. It wasn't health. It was insurance. And the problem was that Obamacare works if you can create a bigger pool of people all paying in more money to pay for those who didn't pay. I mean, it's pure socialism is what it amounts to. So if you like socialism, you love Obamacare. But here's the problem. As many people virtually lost their insurance or couldn't afford it as who ended up getting it, which was the goal that we were supposed to have had, which makes no sense if you just simply sort of move the shelves around the top of the table. If we really want to transform the healthcare system in this country, let's approach the health of America rather than the health care insurance of America. Let me give an example. Our entire healthcare system is based on intervention after we have become very, very sick. So there's no real focus on preventing or curing. The focus is all on intervening, which is unbelievably expensive. A couple of figures for you. 80% of all the money that we spend on the healthcare system in this country is spent on chronic disease. Now think about that. Chronic disease, 80% of the cost, which means that for the most part, we spend healthcare dollars on things that we likely could have prevented, but they're largely driven by overeating, underexercising, smoking, and to some degree genetics. Here's another one. 85% of our lifetime health care costs are spent in our last 18 months of life. So if you live to be 90, at age 88 and a half, you've spent 15% of all of the health care dollars you will spend in your lifetime, 15%. In the last 18 months up to 90, you will spend 85%. You say, that's staggering. You bet it is. But because we end up having extraordinarily expensive end-of-life care. I'm not suggesting we don't have end-of-life care. I'm suggesting that the problem is we limp to the finish line because we are very sick. What's the answer? Well, what if the next president said, we're going to find a cure for the 4 big cost diseases in the country: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's. Because those 4 diseases eat up a big chunk of the healthcare dollar. I look around this room. Some of you were around in the 50s. I was. You know what you remember? The polio vaccine. Remember that? I lined up at our county courthouse in Hope, Arkansas for 3 Sunday afternoons in a row and got my polio vaccine. And guess what? I never had polio. I had friends a little older than me that had it. They had to go to the iron lung and wear braces. I never did because I got the vaccine. Polio was cured. And so polio eradicated in the 50s. We've saved hundreds of billions of dollars since the 1950s over the last 60 years because we didn't have to treat polio. Could you imagine what we'd be saving if we didn't have to treat heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's? Well, I can tell you that cancer is over $100 billion a year. Heart disease, $313 billion a year under current cost. Diabetes, $500 billion a year. Alzheimer's will be a $1.1 trillion disease by the year 2050 at the current rates. We're talking about staggering amounts of money. And by the way, I picked those 4 diseases. Everyone in here, every one of us have been touched by one or more of those diseases, either personally, mother or father, son or daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, right? Any exceptions to that? Is anybody here that has not had one of those 4 diseases within your immediate context of family? Anybody? I didn't think so. We all have been touched by it in some way or another. And it's not just the cost. It is the extraordinary human toll that it takes on us. So the short term is that we quit making people buy things they don't need, don't want, can't afford. The fault of Obamacare. I've got maternity insurance, for example. Because under Obamacare, you have to have it. I want you to think about that for a minute. I I'm a 60-year-old male, just turned 60 a month and a half ago. I have maternity benefits, so if I get pregnant, I'm covered. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get pregnant. And if I do, I don't need insurance because I'll get a reality show about this. The last thing I'll need is insurance, man. I'm going to have my own show just about a 60-year-old male gives birth. I mean, this is going to be big. We're laughing because you say that's ludicrous. Of course it is. That's how stupid the federal government has become. Making us buy things we don't need, can't afford, and don't want in order to basically just spread the cost out. And we ought to only buy the things that we need, can afford, and really do want. And that's a big, big difference between what we have today. Okay, let me take a few more questions. Yes, sir.
Mr. Huckabee, I'm puzzled with the gridlock in Washington. You know, and you've said what you've done in Arkansas.
Yeah.
How do you really propose to get the machine moving? It seems like it's so divided, and just those of us sitting out here are going like, come on, Washington, move. You know, what are some things you do to break that gridlock?
Great question. Let me first of all be very clear. Gridlock is better than moving in the wrong direction. So sometimes, we say, gee, I hate that it's gridlock. The only thing I would hate worse is being in reverse. So, but I don't think gridlock is how the founders intended. However, I will say this, the founders did not intend for government to be radicalized and moved by 5 unelected lawyers, and government didn't, the founders did not expect government to be moved by one out-of-control president who failed to recognize the other 2 branches. So there's a real problem in the breakdown of our fundamental constitutional form of government and our ignoring it. People say, what's the biggest issue? I can say the economy, national security, the moral crisis. But overreaching in many ways, the biggest issue is we've got to have people who have actually read the Constitution, not legal opinions, but the Constitution itself, who believe in it, who revere the genius of this document, who recognize that when our founders created it, what they did, they recognized that we are sinful creatures. I know that's not a politically correct assessment, so I'll use this. We are frail. What it means is the founders knew that left to oneself, every human is corruptible and would end up messing things up. If without accountability, all of us will completely fall apart. Look, as a believer, this much I know. All of us have sinned and come short of the glory of God, right? I don't think any of us would say, I'm perfect. There was, by the way, a pastor who was preaching. He rhetorically asked the question from the pulpit. He said, is anybody in this congregation perfect? And one guy in the back stood up. The pastor was startled. He thought he didn't understand the question, so he said again, I said, is anybody here today perfect? Guy still stands up. He just is astonished, so he finally stops. He says, sir, I ask if anybody's perfect, and you're standing back there. Are you trying to tell us that you're perfect? He said, oh, no, sir. I was just standing for my wife's first husband. Took you a minute, but here's my point. The founders understood something that we have failed to acknowledge in modern times because we don't want to address this thing called sin nature. They understood it. They accepted it. They believed it. And so they built into the Constitution checks and balances. Accountability is what it is. So that any entity, whether it's the legislative branch with the power of the purse, the executive branch with the power of the sword, or the judicial branch, the power really only to review the actions of the other 2, but each of them were equal, yet separate, each having checks and balances to keep the others from getting out of control. If one of those branches fails in its constitutional duty to check and to balance the others, then that branch of government not only has failed the Constitution, they have completely disregarded the oath they took. And one of the things that I've said so very clearly, and I mean this, if the next president is willing to surrender the entire executive branch to judicial supremacy, then we have in essence surrendered the country to judicial tyranny. And listen to what Jefferson and others had to say about this, because Jefferson said, if we practice this notion of judicial supremacy, that the court makes law, then we have turned the Constitution into a thing of wax. Very explicit. And that's exactly what we've done. So I hope that kind of gets at your question. Well, let me say one other thing, because how do you move the gridlock? The reason that I see a lot of the gridlock is because there are no even attempts to build relationships with people. I want to remind you, I took on a legislature who hated my guts. I mean, just understand, they were not happy that I was there because they didn't want a Republican government. And they didn't want me. But here's what I found. You build relationships even with the people that don't like you, some of whom will never like you, will never work with you, will do everything they can to undermine you. A lot of those I helped send to prison. That was my comeuppance to them. But a lot of them, what you do, you build relationships with people not because they ever are going to like you, but because you convince them that they care about something that you care about, whether it's the education of their children, whether it's the roads that their constituents drive on, whether it's the jobs that you want to bring to their community, and you involve them in that process. And you don't react to everything they say about you in the paper. You suck it up and you let people take their shots. Because there's no point in getting into a spitting war with people, because all you do is get spit all over everybody, and nobody wins that. And it takes, quite frankly, sometimes some real patience to not engage in every tit for tat. And it takes time. It's why that by the time of my reelection as governor, I had 48% of the African American vote in my state, something no Republican in this country, I believe, can tell you they've ever received, white or black. And it's why I actually had Democrat senators, African American senators, walking neighborhoods with me and doing radio spots with me. Because I didn't govern with a view toward how many people I could hurt and how many people I could alienate. But I never governed against my principles. We passed pro-life legislation that never could get out of a committee prior to my being governor. We passed bills that my predecessor had proposed that were defeated by 80% on a ballot, and I got it passed by 80%. It's a lot of that's what leadership is. And it's about being able to persuade people, communicate, articulate, and win people over who basically don't really want to like you. If you can't do that, you can't lead. All right. Julie?
I'm an almost millennial,
Uh-huh.
and I regard accomplishment. So can you, I see some fellow pro-life activists here and
Yep.
some pro-Second Amendment advocates here. Can you outline your actual accomplishments on the life and Second Amendment issue?
On the life issue, we passed fetal protection. We passed a law that was named for a specific case in Arkansas called the Baby Sharon Act. But it meant that if you were going to have a child and instead of abandoning it or aborting it, you left it at a fire station, police station, hospital, you would not be criminally charged. We passed.
You were the first to do that, if I recall.
We were.
Your state was.
The Fetal Protection Act, which I had an African-American state senator to lead, Democrat, passed that. 2 weeks after I signed that bill into law, talking about God sort of just validating it, a lady who was 6 months pregnant was severely beaten by a group of thugs, and they killed her baby and beat her up pretty bad. Up until that law, they would have only been charged with beating her up. But because of the Fetal Protection Act, they were charged with the murder of the baby. That was a very significant thing. It was one of the reasons that senator ended up later campaigning for me. We passed a 24-hour notification, parental approval. We never funded Planned Parenthood, so that was not an issue for us. And there was another issue. My first week as governor, when I was thrust into the office, there was a case put before us where we were asked to pay a Medicaid abortion, which I could not do because one of my first forays into politics was in the 80s. I wasn't running for anything, but I was a part of a statewide effort to get a ballot initiative in Arkansas that would be called the Unborn Child Amendment. It became Amendment 75 to the Arkansas Constitution, and that amendment protected human life from conception. It said that the policy of Arkansas was that from conception, we would protect human life until natural death. So that was in our Constitution. If there was a Medicaid issue, which was a federal program with state funding as part of it, there was an attempt to try to force me into sort of, I guess you might say, a Solomon moment. Are you going to, supply the funds for a Medicaid abortion? Because if you do, you violated the state constitution. If you hold to the state constitution, then the federal government was already threatening they would pull all $3.5 billion of Medicaid funding from the state, everything. And so I said, we will not violate that. And so it was a very controversial thing. I got sued. It was a mess, but we ended up holding our ground, and we did not lose Medicaid.
About that?
What's that? Do what?
Holding your ground
Holding your ground?
in case of a lawsuit.
Well, you just, there'll be lawsuits. I got sued almost every week. I got sued my very first day as governor. I walked in, I got sworn in. I was thinking, this is a great day. I'm the governor. And my staff attorney walks in and says, you've just been sued. I said, for God's sake, I've only been in office 4 hours. I mean, how do I get sued? It's part of the deal. You get sued, and you have to fight. You also have to realize the courts aren't always right, which is one of my issues. And by the way, for pro-life, see, I think we've played this all wrong. We keep playing defense. And I got to admit, I think I've thought about this. The Constitution is already clear. The Fifth Amendment says that you can't be deprived of life or liberty without due process. And the 14th Amendment says the same thing regarding down to the states and says there's equal protection under the law. So the question is really not, is there protection? The question is the unborn child a person? Because if the unborn child is a person, you don't have to get a constitutional amendment, and you don't have to repeal anything. You simply have to apply the constitutional benefits that are already there to every person, including...
Well, I'm always disappointed when my videos end so uncleanly. We don't know how maybe we want Huckabee to finish his thought. That's not an option, unfortunately, because it just abruptly cuts off that way, and I apologize for that. What I have for you next is John Hook's Newsmaker. We always enjoy watching John Hook's Newsmaker. I actually typically like to do it on Mondays, but yesterday we had a little bit of trouble with our stream. But here is John Hook's Newsmaker, where he talks to an employee for the Arizona Lottery. Man, did you see that lady that won the lottery today on our 5 o'clock broadcast? She spent $20 in lottery tickets, and she and her boyfriend both quit their longtime jobs. And the boys were making fun of it, saying, well, he better just go ahead and seal the deal if he wants to live the good life.
Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. We're going to talk about the Arizona Lottery. Where does the money go? What's the deal? Are there too many games? All of this stuff. Because the lottery, to a lot of people, you may play, you may not. But a lot of it is a mystery, frankly, to a lot of Arizonans, even though it was approved by voters by a pretty narrow margin back in 1980. So we're a ways into this experiment, no longer an experiment. And our guest this week on Newsmaker Sunday is Tony Bowie, who was appointed by Governor Doug Ducey at the end of January, took the job in early February. And I want to show you, good to see you. I want to show you a little bit of your history on the big wall. If you don't know Tony Bowie, here he is right here. All-American with the U of A, part of the Desert Swarm. Can you name every guy in that picture?
Oh, absolutely. Brandon Sanders, Teddy Bruschi, Jim Hoffman, and Sean Harris.
There you go.
Yeah, it's the Desert Swarm days. Look at those guns, John.
I know, very impressive. So how does an ASU guy like Ducey appoint a U of A guy who's in the Ring of Honor, by the way, down at U of A? How did that happen?
He's trying to dress up the place a little bit, right? Bring a few Wildcats.
Are we starting this already? All right. You got out of U of A. You went on to play professional football for the Bucks for Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 4 years. And then you end up going to the School of Business over here at ASU, the Carey, WP Carey. And that starts your journey on a whole nother track.
Yeah.
Tell me how that went.
You know what? I got my first master's at the University of Arizona while I finished while I was in the NFL. I retired in '98, so I ended up coming back to Phoenix and ended up buying a Chevron gas station convenience store. It was my first foray into business. And after about a year into that, I thought to myself, you know, I don't know enough about business. So I ended up going back to school to get an MBA at W.P. Carey.
And then you continue down this business track. How do you end up in the lottery? How do you end up appointed by Ducey? How did that happen?
You know what? I ended up moving out of my own business and went to work for Circle K, ran the west side of Phoenix for Circle K, and then they went through the ownership changes from ConocoPhillips and from Tosco to ConocoPhillips and thereon. And then I ended up, you know, starting my own business. I invented a product. I started a business while I was at W.P. Carey School of Business. I wrote a business plan, won the W.P. Carey business plan writing competition, won the first ever Edson Award, and then started my business, and I was off and running. And about 6 years ago, life was great. I was running that business. Beautiful wife at the time, two kids, 3 and 1. And I was diagnosed with, out of the blue, stage 4 lymphoma. And I'd always wanted to run for office, but I thought it'd be later in life. And so I said, you know, life is short, let's do it now. I ended up running in 2008, narrowly losing in the primary for the Republican Party. And that set me off into a journey in being really involved in politics.
Now, people watching are going to say, African-American guy, Republican, whoa, what's that about? You grew up in New Orleans. How do you end up in the Republican Party?
You know, I think it's not uncommon for people, African Americans, to have the values of the Republican Party, but there's just an entrenched kind of lineage of people just signing the D on their name when they become of age to vote, which was my history. I grew up in New Orleans. My dad said, hey, you know, selective service, check a D, there you go. Didn't vote in primary, so I really didn't see the R in the D ticket. It was, here's a ticket, you vote for whoever
General
you
election.
want.
Yeah, you're just voting for whoever you liked.
Yeah, yeah. And when I really realized, it was my first year in the National Football League, my first check, and I got it and I looked at it, and it was, I mean, this is the coup de grace. You finally made it.
Yep, and you look at the taxes, right?
And half of it was gone.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember getting up from my locker room, walked to the front office of the accountant, and said, hey, I got a problem with my, you know, where's the rest of it? And he's like, that's the government for you. And that was the kind of genesis of me really thinking,
that was the moment where you said, what is going on here?
Why didn't I get all the money that I've worked so hard for when I finally got to where I was going?
Very, very interesting. So let's fast forward to the lottery. As you know, voters approved it in 1980. So we end up with this thing, and I was around at the time and going to ASU, pardon me. And there was such a debate about whether this would increase gambling, whether this would lead to addiction, that this was a road that we may not want to go down.
Yeah.
What would you say to those folks now as we're, what are we, 35 years later?
Yeah, you know, you really have to be responsible when playing. You know, we give $300,000 a year to the Problem Gambling Fund operated by the Department of Gaming. We message all of our players about being responsible when they play. And I'm on the side where I don't tell people what to do with their money, but we want to be responsible in what we do with the lottery. It's hard to replace $176 million in fund transfers, which we gave last year, and a record number, by the way.
And even opponents of the lottery in the legislature say it'll never be repealed because there's no way you could replace those revenue streams.
Can't replace it.
Right. Let's talk about where the money goes, and we'll show some people playing, and I'll ask you in a minute about all the games that are going on. But obviously Powerball was a big deal, and I remember when Governor Symington appointed a new lottery director at that time from Kansas, I seem to recall. And Governor Symington said, we're gonna get into the Powerball business because there's big money in that.
Yeah.
This has been a good thing?
It's been a very good thing for Arizona. You know, it is becoming a smaller portion of our product sales. Most of our, about 71% comes from instant tickets, the scratcher tickets.
Is that right?
Yeah. The other remaining piece really comes from online interstate games, Mega Millions and Powerball.
Right, right. Let me run through some of these because I was astonished. I've got to be honest, Tony. I don't play a lot of the lottery games. I might buy a Powerball occasionally, but you've got Powerball, Mega Millions, the Pick, Fantasy 5, Pick 3, weekly winnings, all or nothing.
Yeah,
That's a lot of games.
The online games, which is what you're talking about, those are 50% margins for the lottery. So we love to sell those. The scratcher tickets vary from ticket to ticket
Sure.
what that margin is. But when we sell, in particular, the pick or the Fantasy 5, we send 50% of that back. Is ours, and we send roughly 22 to 25% of what we generate back to the state.
This was an astonishing number. Since July of 1981, when they started really tracking it and when the money started rolling in, the Arizona Lottery has paid out more than $5.8 billion in prizes to players and more than $3 billion in net funding to the state and more than $686 million in commissions to retailers. What does that mean, commissions to retailers?
Commissions to retailers, they get commission of the sales and of what they sell.
An incentive to have it.
Yes, absolutely. And we also give top prize awards if they sell the top prize.
Right.
Like the fries on West Avondale just sold a $6.2 million pick ticket last week.
Right.
They'll get a pretty good check as a reward.
Did a winner come forward on that one?
Yes. He just came, I believe it was yesterday.
Anonymous?
Actually, he opted out of it, so he allowed his name to be released in this picture.
How do you feel about that, about releasing the name of lottery winners? And they have a choice now, don't they?
They do. SB 1047 allows them to remain anonymous for 90 days. They opt into that automatically.
Right.
If you want your name to release, then you've got to opt out of it. I think it's really important for the general public to see who we give the money to, that people are real. It goes to the integrity of the game, in my opinion. If people don't eventually see who it is, they think, did somebody win? Are they just giving it away? Are they keeping it at the lottery? So we need to make sure that we continue to show who is winning these tickets.
Remind me again, if you win, how long do you have to turn in a winning ticket?
You have 180 days after the draw, or if it's an instant ticket, scratcher ticket, you have 180 days after the game is pulled from the shelf to claim your prize.
Do we have a lot of unclaimed prizes in Arizona?
We do. Last year, it was about $5.7 million that was in the unclaimed prize fund.
That's a lot of dough.
It is. And believe me, we're going to do something about it. In my opinion, that is 180 degrees opposite of what the lottery should be doing, which is if you buy a ticket and you win, you should get your prize. I mean, that's kind of what the social contract really is. So we're going to be putting in technology going forward about if you win, we want to notify you before the 180 days is up. And that'll be a free opt-in program for people.
How would you do that? That would require a big technology change, right? You have to identify, the person has to identify who they are to make sure that they're reminded.
They would. So our largest vendor, we just went through a change, we're going through a change, excuse me, this coming summer. To a new online gaming company, and I'm working with them to get that into place. So you buy a scratcher ticket, you buy a pick ticket or Powerball, go online to your own account, scan it into a mobile app, or put the numbers into your player profile, and we have that information. If it comes up as a winner, we want to ping you before the 180 days is up. Hey, you've got a winning ticket in your pocket.
This is going to be a bonanza because I would think the real barrier for a lot of people playing these games is inconvenience. They don't want to run down to a store and play. You're saying you're going to be able to play all this online.
Well, no, I'm not saying you're going to be able to play online. I'm saying you're going to be able to buy your ticket in person.
Yes.
And then scan it or type the numbers into your player profile. So we have it. So we make sure that if those numbers come up in our winning profile, that we can email you or whatever way that we
so that they know who you are.
Yes.
Could you ever get to a point where you could start to play any of this online?
Some states have tried that. That's not a place that we want to go. We don't want to expand the lottery into a place that makes it too easy to play.
Yeah, interesting. So you want that barrier to a degree so that it's not too easy to play.
As long as I'm there, I don't see us doing it.
You got in February. When you got in, what was the learning curve?
Just all the moving parts. I mean, it's such a niche industry. There's only 44 of us in the United States. That from the prize structure to the very few vendors that actually provide these services to the lotteries across the country, to working politically on how that works in each state is very unique, and you've got to really, you know, bury your head in when you get there and make sure you know what you're doing. Is there a direction that you would say you're trying to take the lottery that may be different than Jeff Hatchmiller, who had the job before you? Absolutely. Jeff did a good job, but I think, under my tenure, I want to do three things in particular. One is I wanted the lottery to be really transparent. So all of our contracts are going to be placed online. In the past, subcontracting with the lottery has been kind of invisible. What's the you just feel the public needs to know who's involved? I think they need to know. I think they know where we spend our money. I think for small businesses that want to do business with the lottery, they should be able to bid on subcontracting opportunities. So I've, read all of our top 7 contracts and started amending them. So subcontracting opportunities will be visible. They'll be posted. So if we, buy shirts or buy media or whatever it is, small businesses will be able to bid on those opportunities. Being a small business owner myself, I think it's important that they have the opportunity. I can't say they're going to win, but they should have the opportunity to bid on our subcontract. And then what are the other things you want to do? Number 2 is we got to be more corporately responsible. There's a perception, which is not true, that the lottery preys on the poor. And to any way that we can mitigate that perception, we'll do it. So our billboards, which we spend millions of dollars on billboards, we are going to take those down or make them just generic messaging in low-income neighborhoods. The second thing we're going to do with that is we are not going to go actively recruit retailers in low-income neighborhoods. Now, if they come to us, that's different. It's our responsibility to license them. But we're not going there and trying to pepper low-income neighborhoods with retail locations. Does that come, may I ask, does that come from the governor? Or is that your own thought? No, these are my thoughts I've had from the day that I got the call. Do you need to run stuff by him and say, here's the direction I'm thinking of going here? They certainly want to be in the know, yes. Okay. And we give them kind of what the direction we're going. He's given pretty much every deputy director, agency director, the ability to be a CEO. And I think that's very telling of his personality. I wanted to ask you about that just quickly before we go to break, because we have to take a break here. But you've been able to size him up because you're a business guy. He's a business guy. Yeah. He talked about running this like a business. Are you seeing that? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We are, as directors, we are put through the gamut. We were the first, one of the first agencies to go through this lean management program. So our licensing program for retailers has been reduced by 50%. So if you want to be a retailer, it takes 50% less time than in the past to become licensed. Getting rid of regulation. Yep, that's absolutely. Something he's talked a lot about in the campaign. Yeah. We're back with Tony Bowie. He is the lottery director, has been since February of this year, and we'll continue our conversation on Newsmaker Sunday right after this. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with your new lottery director. This is Tony Bowie. He was just a terrific safety for University of Arizona, and then he was an All-American at U of A, and then played professionally for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, went to W.P. Carey, got his degree, got your master's, and into business of his own, and then becomes a lottery director. You did make one quick foray into running for office. Yes, yeah. As a Republican. Yep. But you narrowly lost. What did you learn from that experience? I met a lot of good people in politics, other legislatures, other lobbyists as well. And I saw a lot of good people, but I saw a lot of room for growth in the quality of some of the people that were down there. That's interesting. Let me circle back for a minute, because before the break, we talked about 3 things you want to change as a new lottery director from your predecessor, Jeff Hatchmiller. We got through 2 of them. Mm-hmm. The final would be what? Is to really make government efficient. There are things that we do that I believe the private sector is better at and can be more efficient at. So what we're doing is we are going to outsource our sales force. We have 25 people that are in our sales department. They drive around in government vehicles and have phones and laptops, and they service all the locations. The problem is we can't pay them enough for what they're worth. We can't give them financial incentive that would really incite them to do even better. And I believe the private sector can do that. There are other lotteries that have done this that we're following the lead on.
Who's done that?
Texas has done it. The Hoosier Lottery, Indiana has done it. And there are a number of others that have done it as well. So we're in negotiations right now about privatizing our sales force.
Yeah, interesting.
Which would save us roughly $2.5 million. It'll move that to a different category. It'll save us $2.5 million off our personnel services line, which allows us flexibility to do other things with the money that we're saving.
I mentioned at the outset, the lottery since 1981 has paid out $5.8 billion in prizes, more than $3 billion in net funding to the state of Arizona. Yeah. Where does the money go? The profits from the lottery?
You know, our mission is to responsibly generate net revenues for the benefit of Arizona programs. And so everything that we do, we've got to make sure that, one, we're using the taxpayers' dollar effectively and efficiently. But the net revenues that we create every single year, last year was a record year, $176 million. I'll read it because there are so many.
Yeah.
The Arizona Board of Regents, the University Bond Fund, we fund buildings that are medical and science buildings in their construction. Arizona Commerce Authority, we have $10 million of game and fish through the Heritage Fund. Court-appointed special advocates, which is a very, very worthy cause. Department of Economic Security and the Healthy Family Program and the Homeless Program. Department of Gaming through the Problem Gaming, Internet Crimes Against Children, which is very new this year.
Right.
The Local Transportation Assistance Fund, Tribal College Scholarship Fund, and the Victims' Rights Enforcement Fund. There are a lot of worthy beneficiaries that we statutorily.
Education gets a big chunk. Right?
Absolutely. You know what? We give, I think last year was about $66 million to the general fund, and that money is divvied up by the legislature. So whatever percentage of the general fund goes to education, that would be that percentage.
And that was one of the knocks on the way this is structured, is that some of that money goes into the legislature, and some of the tracking of that money, it's hard to know exactly, does it go to education or do the lawmakers spend it on something else?
You're absolutely right. There are other states that are only education lotteries.
Could that be coming? Is that a possibility, or would that require a change in statute?
That would require a change in statute, but it's been done. There are a number of other lotteries. There are several billion-dollar lotteries. 48% of those billion-dollar lotteries are education only. There's something to be said about this is where the money goes, and it only goes here.
Right.
But that would be a heavy lift.
Some of the money goes to roads, too, doesn't it?
It does. We, I believe it's $11 million a year goes to the Local Transportation Assistance Fund.
There's no undoing the lottery. You said 44 states have it now out of 50.
Yes.
Has tribal gaming impacted lottery revenues?
You know, there are 44 lotteries, and our statutory restriction on age is 21. We are only one of 3 lotteries out of the 44 that have it at 21. Everybody else has it at 18. And that's because of the compacts that really force us to keep it at 21.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So tribal gaming actually influenced you in that area?
Oh, it does, yeah.
And the fact that there is so much gaming now in Arizona because of the tribes, does that hurt your bottom line? Do you feel they're a competitor?
You know, we look at every, entertainment venue as a competitor, as a share of wallet. So we're competing with
There's
movie
only so much
theaters.
money to go around, right?
Yeah. So we've got to make sure that we are providing a product that is out there that's, attracts the player that wants to play.
When you got in there, what was the biggest eye-opener when you got in as lottery director? What were you like, wow, did not know that? What would that be?
How much money it takes to actually run the lottery. It's astounding. But I think the biggest thing for me was just to really delve into the contracts. In my opinion, it's a privilege to do business with the government, not a right. So when we have contracts with people, we got to make sure that they are giving them, us, the lottery, the state, the government, the taxpayer, exactly what the contract says. And it hasn't always been the case.
We're back with Tony Bowie. He is your new Arizona Lottery Director, appointed by Doug Ducey in January and took the job officially. Walked in the door in February. He's been on the job now for several months, and we're kind of getting a sense of where the money goes and how the lottery all works. Back in a minute on Newsmaker Sunday with Tony Bowie. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with the Arizona Lottery Director, Tony Bowie, former All-American for University of Arizona. I'm choking on the word.
Bear down.
Bear down. From a Sun Devil, this is difficult, but he's a good guy. All-American, part of that Desert Swarm team, amazing team. Played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Got his master's in business and has been in his own business and ends up the lottery director here this year. What would you like people to know about the lottery? We've got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to kind of give you the floor, give you a chance to talk about.
You know, the lottery provides so much for the community. All 15 counties benefit, whether it's through commissions back to the retailers, whether it's through some of our community sponsorships, whether it's through prizes that we give back to people in their community. Arizona would not be able to function as it does today without the lottery.
So you think what voters approved in 1980 on balance has been a good thing, even though there was a lot of hand-wringing about whether this was good for the public?
Yeah, you know, there can be, I guess, your argument made now that the lottery pumps so much money into, you know, certain programs that maybe the legislature has backed off. I mean, that's a whole political discussion I think that they can have down there.
That we become addicted to it.
Yeah.
Fiscally addicted to it.
It probably should be on top of whatever else they do. But, you know, they can argue that till they're blue in the face down there. But I think the lottery is very, very needed. And under my tenure, we're going to make sure that we're responsible in advertising the lottery and the games that we put out.
What do you think is coming in this whole industry? What is out there on the horizon that we may not have even talked about in my world?
You know, there are going to be states that delve into the online piece of it.
They are.
But like I said before, that's nothing that we want to do. We'll actually, you know, see what happens. But there's a whole legal battle, not congressional battle, about RAWA, which is the Wire Act that they're trying to put on lottery.
A few seconds left. You mentioned to me in the break, this is a very highly secure deal, the lottery.
Yeah.
It is really a secure system.
Without people really believing that the lottery has the integrity, it falls apart. If people think we're shifting numbers or we're doing something nefarious, the whole thing will fall apart. So you have to make sure that the public believes in the integrity of the lottery.
Hey, listen, great to see you.
Thank
Congratulations on the job, and we'll have you back.
Yeah,
Tony Bowie, your lottery director for Arizona. Back on Newsmaker Sunday next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
And I was just hurrying our anchors into the studio because it is almost 9 o'clock and they weren't mic'd up or anything. So just giving them a, hey, the 9 o'clock news is almost on. Might want to jump in there. Reminder. But the 9 o'clock news is almost on. It's 8:58, which means in just a few minutes, we are going to jump into our 9 o'clock broadcast with John Hook and Troy Hayden. I'm going to give you the evening forecast because I'm about to walk outside to go home, and I'm hoping it's not pouring rain.
Yes, with Dave Muncy on Fox 10 News.
Well, kind of an exciting day. We get some cloud cover. We get these cooler temperatures. We get some very, very heavy rain. There was a 60-mile-an-hour wind gust down in Coolidge. They've had some hail down there as well. We've had some up here as well. 69 degrees right now, a few clouds out there. It's still raining in a few places. Winds out of the north at 13. 55 degrees on the dew point, 61%. On the humidity, these temperatures are going to be down a little bit. 67 in Scottsdale, 68 in Mesa, 65 at Cave Creek, the same at Deer Valley, 66 in Glendale, 67 right now in Ahwatukee. Here's the low pressure system. It is tracking across the state. As long as it is down here, it's going to be bringing that moisture in. It's going to be kicking off storms. So we're going to be looking at this through the night tonight. As you can see, here's Phoenix with some warnings that have expired for flooding. A few of the advisories are going to be up until 10 o'clock this evening, just to make sure that all of this moisture is drained out before they give up on it. Right down here, you can see the Glendale area and all of the moisture running through that area at this time. Those folks dealing with quite a bit of moisture through the day. Here's Deer Valley. It's drying out a little bit just north of there. Very, very, very heavy rain for those folks. And then we get down to Tempe, the Guadalupe area. New storms moving in there at this time. There you see some of that rain that they're dealing with. And then speaking of that rain, you can see how heavy that's been. Some of this green stuff gets up into the 3/4 of an inch rain. There's an inch over in the Cave Creek area. You can see that Peoria got hit pretty hard. And then these areas out east of Buckeye picking up some very, very, very heavy moisture as well. In fact, let's take a look at the rain gauge and you will see just south of Buckeye there's an inch, and then you go a little bit southwest of Buckeye, you've got 1 in 1800. Sun City West, we get a half an inch up there. 20/100 in Ahwatukee. We had 71/100 of an inch in Paradise Village, and then in Anthem 1 and 25/100 of an inch. On the day today, we went to 80 degrees. 105 is the record. 92 is the normal high temperature. Through the night, we'll be looking at a chance of rain, 68 degrees. For tomorrow, 87. There's a little chance of rain, mostly in the morning. Thursday, it dries out, 94. Friday, it stays dry, 95. We stay dry through the weekend. You see those 97s up there, and some 90s to greet you next week as well. Watch your kids around water.
Ale, that was totally for you. Despite the fact that you just came in at the last minute, you were gone this whole time. You just stroll in 5 minutes to the end of the show, and you're the most popular kid in class, but it took you all night long to get here. Thanks so much to Pete. Thanks so much to Rachel. I had fun tonight. And I mean, I know a lot of people don't like politics and don't like watching all the political stuff, but I personally do enjoy it. Wait, when did Paradise Valley become a village? Asks Rachel. It rained. It's an island now. Ale, you are so funny. But it is 9 o'clock. It's 9:02. And I'm looking at the news, and it's John Hook, and it's Troy Hayden. Bye. So I'm going to let you go. You should be watching us right now on Channel 10. If you're not watching us on Channel 10 because you don't live here, you can head over to fox10phoenix.com/live and watch our live local television news broadcast. Download our app. It's free, and you'll receive text alerts every time there's breaking news. You can watch our stream on your phone. You should also follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Next time it's crazy weather, you should be hashtagging fox10phoenix.com, and your pictures might end up on our broadcast. Most likely, definitely, Fox 10 News Now, because you've got a lot of access to the hosts here. But we'll be back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I greatly appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Happy Hump Day tomorrow. Today's still Tuesday. But it feels like Friday, but it's still Tuesday. Bye. I have to, I'm returning. I haven't stopped the stream yet. I'm returning for one last thing. Love that Ale ends my show with, yes, drive safe. Do not give cars indications that you want to race. One of the funniest things Ale has ever said, and Ale always says funny things. So top 5.